Patricia,
Hey.
how you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Awesome. Welcome back to Seattle.
Oh, it's awesome to be here, and it's a beautiful sunny day.
This is a rare
showing
thing.
off.
This is a rare thing, and Seattle's showing off just for you.
Yeah.
Because it hasn't necessarily been this way. It's just been nonstop rain. You know.
I know. Well, I've lived in Vancouver. I was born and raised in Vancouver, and very similar weather, and that's why everything's green, right? We get lots of rain.
When the sun's out, this is one of the best places on earth to be. But
exactly.
we have to endure like 10 months, of rain in order to get these kinds of days.
Right.
Patricia, I thought it'd be fun just to dive into just what Jesus is doing on the earth right now. It feels like there's so much momentum right now, and everything from it might seem silly to people, but even just beginning the year with the Super Bowl and Bob's word about the Chiefs and about these hidden apostles that were going to be coming out, and like just the anticipation for harvest and salvations and souls. So and you're kind of everywhere. What are you seeing Jesus do? Like what makes you the most excited as far as what you're seeing in the kingdom and on the earth right now?
Right. Well, it's the most amazing time ever to be alive, right? That we get to be alive in this day and age is phenomenal. But everything is escalating. It is like, Darren, it's just crazy. Like I was just thinking, I was doing some studying on the last 70 years from 1950 to 2020, right? And the escalation of God over that period, and how that we have just kept growing and growing, expanding. And so we come into this last 20 years, and we had like Reinhard Bonnke. I think his largest gathering back in 1990 was like 1 million souls came in, right? And it was just like, I used to weep when I looked at that picture, right? It was a picture of harvest.
Just the faces as far as you could see.
The magnitude of it, it was as far as the eye could see. And I would just weep. I thought, I can't even imagine 1 million people coming together. Excuse me. And so then, in the year 2000, he had 6 million people. I'm really sorry.
No, you're good. Bonnke. Yeah, you're good.
So he had 6 million people in the year 2000, and it kept escalating. So nowadays, it's not unusual to have crusades of 1 million people.
Right.
It happens all the time now. And there are hundreds of thousands of people getting saved per day oftentimes in those crusades. I was in one just a little while ago down in Bolivia where there was about 500,000.
Wow.
And again, it was very surreal.
500,000 people at one crusade?
500,000 people in attendance.
Wow.
And it was just... you just weep when you think all these people are gathering, and they're not sitting on chairs. There's not air-conditioned rooms. This is like outdoors, everyone's standing for hours, and all of a sudden Jesus shows up in miracles, signs, and wonders, and this harvest comes in. Over 300,000 documented salvations.
That's incredible. That is so awesome. That is so amazing.
It's just so, but that's in one sweep. That was a one-night crusade. Now, this is not unusual. They're happening all over. We know our friend Charlie Champ, he had a significant event over in Pakistan that you and I were both involved in. And we were expecting about 75,000 people. And there's hundreds of thousands of people showed up, and just God showed up in power, miracles, signs, and wonders. So this is what we're seeing. We had the Send event down in South America just recently, filled 3 stadiums of people for the one event. 3 stadiums.
That's incredible. I couldn't believe the pictures I was seeing coming out of there.
It was a commissioning of the body of Christ into the harvest field. So we're living in a pretty spectacular day, and it is not unusual. Like I remember when I was a brand new Christian, if you heard about a miracle of healing, it was huge, right? It was fully celebrated, and it was wonderful, but they were few and far between. Well, now there's barely a day that goes by when you don't hear of someone being touched by the Lord in their body, or, it might be as simple as a headache leaving, but back in the day when we first started seeing the power of God move, that was huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now cancers are being removed. People's bodies are being quickened, and, extreme miracles. That is not unusual anymore. The dead being raised is not unusual anymore.
Yeah,
and
come on.
It's just amazing. This is becoming supernatural, natural, right? It's very a very beautiful day that we're living in. And the Bible says the latter glory of the house is greater than the former. So what are we going to anticipate? What are we coming into? And how should we prepare? Because I believe there's going to be a mobilization of the whole body into harvest.
So it's possible that, like, you think that as far as the stuff that we're seeing right now, like the quantity of events, the size of the events, and the fruit of these events that are taking place all over the world, that it's possible that the earth has never seen such momentum in the kingdom as what we're actually seeing right now?
Never before. Study church history or Bible history. Whenever has there been so many people on the face of the earth, of course. Sure. But with the technology that we have today, do you know that, back in the 1960s and 1970s, there was such a change in the church at that time, even music-wise. Just think of this one area, okay? So up to about 1960s, early 1970s, it was traditional for there to be a song leader in the church and an organ and a hymn book. And then, of course, in the 1960s and 70s, choruses were introduced during the charismatic renewal. Yeah. But what happened? What happened since then? I mean, back then in the day when they pulled out the guitar and we started singing Kumbaya, that was a big deal, right?
Right, absolutely.
But now it's like you can't even keep up with all the songs of the Lord and the worship unto the Lord, the praise, the adoration, the celebration of the Lord is on media. For one thing, you can do a playlist on media 24/7 in your own home. You can worship the Lord, and you cannot even keep track with all the songs. I travel to a lot of different places, and there's lots of places where I find, wow, never heard that song before, never heard that one before, because there's just a pregnant womb in the church that is giving birth to so much in this hour. Wow. And as far as souls, evangelism has never been so easy. Even think of missionaries, okay? Back in the day, up until about the missionary movement of, let's say, YWAM, Keith Green Ministries, Agape Force now, when they went into a lot of the shorter term missions and trained the young people and just sent them out everywhere. Up until that time, which was basically late 60s, early 70s, the traditional missionaries, they would go through Bible school, and then they would be sent out by the church into their mission field for life, and they might come back a few times to raise support or to show their slides, but I mean, that was it. And now everyone's going to and fro, in and out, all over the place, not only in the natural, but also being transported in the spirit. And so we are living in this day and hour where we've never had so much. We've never been so affluent as far as, a corporate nation, like everyone having access to everything. It is an amazing day that we are living in, and God is breathing on every good thing, and we're just kind of in the current of that wind saying, okay, Lord, here we are, let's go for it.
Well, I think it's so cool. I absolutely believe it. And it's so cool because sometimes it's easy to not see that perspective. In fact, I'm reading a book right now called The Myth of the Dying Church. And it's actually going through, it's giving a bunch of stats of what's happening within the church right now. And it's a completely different narrative than what's been painted for the last 10 years, because there has been this narrative that the church is dying and that it's not growing and that churches are shutting down. But what's interesting is one of the things that book talks about is it's the compromised churches are dwindling and shutting down, but that churches that are adhering to the centrality of Christ,
that's awesome,
and the supremacy of God's word, they're not dwindling. Actually, they are growing, and that we're actually seeing like you could say that we are actually seeing a major revival right now in the U.S.
Absolutely.
In the church.
I believe it.
Sometimes I wonder if we overly frame out revival in the context of the last 100 years versus what God is doing. We've got to really have eyes to see and ears to hear, because he's doing a new thing.
Well, if you think of what he's done even in this last 30 years, let's say, because there was the emergence, through Korea, there was the emergence of the cell group churches that gave birth to a lot of the home churches and that. So we've got that whole movement. There's a big movement out of England, a big movement in South America where house churches were being birthed constantly. And that's huge, just even in that, right?
Absolutely.
And then you've got your mega churches. this. And I know that people have some negative things to say about mega churches, but I've been in a few and I thought they were fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, wherever Jesus is being preached and his word is being preached is amazing, and God's drawing the people in. And there would be like 20,000 people in a church, right? And some of them, like Apostle Maldonado's church in Miami, Florida, 20,000 20,000 people church, and plus, because there's so many satellite churches in that, but they're all filled with the Holy Spirit and working miracles. In fact, it's a demand in the Spirit, actually, is that, come on, if you're a real Christian, you'll be working miracles, right?
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And so this is in our day. This is happening right now. And of course, we've got Bethel, with a whole kingdom culture being spread globally. We've got a new supernatural missions movement where you've got Heidi Baker, for example, birthed out of the 94 revival. There was a struggling missionary where she was struggling with 3 churches, or 3 plants, I should say, that were failing. All of a sudden, Holy Spirit breathes on it, and she's in almost every dark nation of the world bringing light, right? And all these missionaries gathered in from all over the world, just being sent into these dark places to love. This is happening in our day.
Incredible.
That doesn't sound like a dead church.
That's right. That's right.
Compromise has to go, and I think that probably if you look at some of the traditional churches where there's religious order, but denying the power, denying the Holy Spirit, probably those are dying, which is probably beneficial in many ways. I mean, you don't want to see anything die. You want to see everything come to life. But if those are dying, then we need to go raise Lazarus from the dead, take off the grave clothes, and let's see them live, right?
That's right. Yeah, it's interesting. I forgot. I was going to say something, and then I completely lost it.
We were talking about the dying churches. Let's resurrect them.
Yeah.
Perceptions of people thinking the church is dying.
Well, yeah. I'm even thinking about just what's happening in LA right now, right? Like all these nightclubs are turning into churches. And so that's a new kind of a thing, and then you got all these celebrities that are attending these churches. And a lot of them aren't necessarily even believers yet, but they're going to church. And then a lot of them are actually. And then
God's
everything that's happening with Kanye, and then
so amazing.
I mean,
I think that ties a lot into the prophetic words on stadiums. I see stadiums, right? And it's like, who would have thought? Like, we have in our mind what a stadium event is going to look like.
That's right.
You hear prophetic words about all these stadiums filling, so you're thinking, maybe something like Billy Graham or whatever, and then Kanye shows up,
right?
And he's having every week stadium events practically,
right.
And he's calling people to righteousness and calling them out of the things that are harmful to them with so much grace and love. It's just so beautiful, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And people are coming to Jesus and just flocking to the Lord in these big gatherings. It's just amazing. And God's just, hello, surprise, here I am, in a different way than you ever would have thought.
Yeah.
And so we have to be open in this hour. We cannot have an old paradigm, even an old renewal paradigm.
That's true. That's true.
Could keep us from what God is about to do.
Yeah, God is moving. Yeah, he is on the move. One of the things you were talking about is how God is using media, and more specifically social media, because back in the day, right, in order to be in media, you had to have some capital, you had to have some funding in order to. And I remember, when I was in Bible school, I did my schooling through the assemblies, and some of their Bible courses were great. Some of their practical ministry courses were a little out of date. I remember the evangelism course that I took, it said the first thing that you should do is raise a bunch of money and get on TV. If you can't afford TV, raise a bunch of money and get a radio show.
Oh my gosh.
That was kind of, because the idea is that that's one of the most efficient ways of getting the gospel out to the masses.
And that's a good thing. They got that.
Is using media. Because so that was their understanding of media, that it's either TV, or it's radio, or it's the newspaper, or magazines, that kind of thing.
And back in the day, there weren't other options, really.
Yeah, and I was just thinking about that. Like now, like we're here, you know, and I put this entire thing together for less than $3,000. You couldn't have done that back in the day. Like a three that would get you maybe a camera.
Yeah.
You know, and so what I'm wondering is, on one hand, that's awesome. Like on one hand, that's great. Everybody gets a platform now. On the other hand, that's kind of terrifying as well, in that anybody with a cell phone can have their own television channel, their own station, their own kind of thing. Yeah. So what I'm wondering, Patricia, is like when it comes to this kind of this new era of the kingdom of God and ministry and social media, like where do you see this all going, and what are some of the things where you feel like there's incredible opportunity, and also what are some of the areas where you feel like as the kingdom we need to kind of be praying into and be kind of watchful and vigilant?
Yeah. Well, number one, everyone should be on media because God opened it up for us.
Hold on. Everyone should be on media?
Every Christian
should be there we go. Media. Yeah. No, I was tracking with you,
Okay.
But that's such a big statement.
Yeah, every Christian should be on media because we have a message.
Yes.
And we've been commanded to preach the gospel to every creature. Where in the history of man or the church have we been able to get in front of the whole wide world and preach the gospel to every creature?
That's right.
You just push a button and there it is. It's out there, and share it. And I mean, if you want to, you could even, buy a boost post if you wanted to and reach people that, aren't in your pool of influence. You could reach people in other religions, just through targeting the marketing, right?
Yeah.
It's just a phenomenal day that we're in. But if we abdicate our position in media and we just waste our days and drink coffee with friends and say nothing to the world that we live in, if we abdicate that position, it will be filled. But it will be filled with things that are harming, mindsets that are harmful mindsets. Yeah. And so a lot is being communicated right now. We're in the decade of the mouth, according to the Hebrew calendar. This is Pei. It's a decade of the mouth.
Interesting.
And so we have to make sure that our mouth is opening up, speaking God's word and speaking God's truth.
Yeah.
Because the devil has a narrative planned that people will jump on board with his current, if they don't have any other options. But I'm convinced that when people hear the truth, they will want the truth. It'll resonate because we were created in truth. We were created for the truth. We were created by the truth. And so when we hear truth, we will resonate. That's what happened to me when I heard the gospel. And so, but if there is no truth being spoken, if the word is not being spoken, then no faith can be released into people's hearts to receive that truth. And so faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of the Lord. Therefore, we need to preach it. Mm-hmm. And these days, I mean, especially, I love social media. Yeah. Because social media, you can be so relaxed and so real and so authentic.
Sure.
It was really funny a while back. I was thinking that I had my Facebook onto a private group, and it was a small private group, and so I had no makeup on. I think I was in my pajamas actually, and I started sharing, and 5 minutes into it I'm noticing, wow, there's a lot of likes and a lot of thumbs up coming through here, and I realized, oh my gosh, I am on my public page and there's over 200,000 people that could have the option of watching this. I thought, I can't believe it, but it was kind of too late to opt out, sort of thing. So I just kept going. And I just shared from my heart because I thought I was sharing with a small group of intimate friends, but I thought, no, I'm just going to stay in the mode. These are all my friends, and I'm talking Jesus talk right now, and I'm just going to share my heart, and I'm going to continue to be real. So, 60, 70,000 views later.
Oh my gosh.
And all these comments, I'm thinking, that was actually quite fun, being relaxed like that and not feeling like you had to do a preach, but just talk Jesus. Wow. Just chat Jesus. Just breathe Jesus, right? And share your heart, share your concerns, share the Bible, and actually do relationship, because I think that's what social media shines with, is the ability to build relationship with your people and just be authentic and real. And so if we have pure hearts and a pure love for Jesus, and if we speak pure truth,
that's good,
and we get it out there and we fill the earth with that, it's light into the darkness. It's like if there's no light going out, the darkness is there. There's nothing to penetrate it. There's nothing to expel it. We have to bring the light into the darkness, and make sure that it's light. Make sure that we are salt and light. If we lose our salt,
that's right,
then there's nothing to preserve. Yeah. If we lose our light, there's nothing to penetrate darkness. So
it's so good. One of the things I think is so inspirational about that is sometimes people might see Patricia King in the studio, gorgeous lighting. I mean, your guys' studio is just amazing there. But then when you go live and you're at home and you're sitting at your table with a cup of coffee, and the content is just as amazing when you're just going live on your phone as it is when you're right there in the studio. And what I think is so inspiring about this, sometimes people think that they have to make a major investment into all the lights and cameras and into a team, but really all you need is a heart that is pure, like you were saying, and a cell phone, and the courage to hit go live,
Exactly. And I mean, it is so simple to set up, and it's just so beautiful. It's just the greatest opportunity ever. And I think also what is so beautiful about social media, it reveals the natural flaws, like, it just reveals naturalness. Whereas a lot of times, if you are in a lit up studio, your own soul has a different expectation.
Wow.
Right?
Wow. That's true.
So it positions you differently. But there's something about social media that makes you so alive in Jesus, because it's like, it's not about you. It is like you are so out of the picture when you're on social media,
right?
And it's like your heart is connecting with the people that you're reaching, and you're connected to Jesus, and just putting him forward. And it's like, Jesus, I'm just this is about you, and so let's build you big here, and let's talk you big, and let's talk your love big, and it's so beautiful. And I believe it frees people to be just themselves as well, that they don't have to copy someone or have a certain style. It used to be like years ago, you'd see certain evangelists get up on the platform and you could tell, okay, you've been trained to talk like that, because like that's not normal.
Right.
That's not the way you normally talk.
Right.
It's probably not the way Jesus did it either, but you've been trained that way. That's an expectation, right?
Right.
But there's something when that gets out of the way, and it's just like you're connected to Jesus, the real raw relationship, authentic relationship with Jesus and with the people that you're sharing with.
Yeah. No, so yeah, I remember. You remember when Periscope was like a big thing, and so I remember I tried to make it like a goal to get onto Periscope during the week, and I would go through books of the Bible. I'd go through chapters. I'd speak topically, but I wanted to get on every day. And I met that's how I met Charlie Shamp, was actually on Periscope, and Monday Martin. And I said, Charlie Shamp, I've heard about you. We were on a phone conversation a couple minutes later. But like, that was one of the best things for me, learning how to preach, learning how to say what I was trying to say, how to do it quickly and efficiently, and then there'd be all these trolls on there, people just trying to get you to fall off your game. Like, there'd be a comment, your eyebrows are huge. And I remember like being like, what? And like, it just completely throwing me off. And like, so I felt like, I mean, if you can preach on Periscope, you could preach on any stage. If you learn how to deal with distractions, if you learn how to just make your point and engage with people, it's such great practice just to go live and just go for it.
I just believe you can reach more people through social media than any other avenue right now. And it's free. God set it up that way. That's why we cannot abdicate our position.
It's good.
The only reason why there's a bunch of garbage out there is because we haven't usurped it with our weight. We haven't created a tipping point of communication, which we have every opportunity to do that. Right?
Yeah, that's right. And speaking of media, so Shiloh is a local church, but it's hosted in a studio, and so you have like hundreds of people that are going to church there, literally at the church. But then you've got thousands and thousands of people that consider Shiloh to be their church, and they're watching online. And I wanted to chat with you about that, because here at Seattle Revival Center, there would be not as large of an audience by any means, but certainly people that are watching online and consider SRC to be their church, and they're tithing to SRC, and they'll even visit, and hey, this is our church, you know. And so it's an interesting question when it comes to wineskin, as far as do you want to, because I've been kind of on the there's a certain amount of tension there for me, wondering how do you do you want to encourage that kind of behavior? Like, I know that at Shiloh, you guys have really gone all in with this integration of media and church. But for me, this whole idea, it's an older school kind of concept of what community is and what discipleship looks like. And I was wondering, and this could even be kind of like just a little mentoring opportunity for me, as far as when you were thinking through in the original kind of mandate that the Lord gave to you for Shiloh and media church and online church. I know that you guys have experienced all kinds of stuff, but could you speak into that as far as that there can be a healthy wineskin where we don't have to be afraid of it, but we can invite people into, and what does fellowship look like, and discipleship and all that all that kind of thing.
Well, I think that number one, you always need the word of the Lord to move forward on anything. He's the all-wise God, and He's interested in capturing every single person, including the people out there that are so bitter and angry with the church that they wouldn't show up in one if you gave them cupcakes if they came, right?
Yeah, or Tesla, right? Yeah.
So He just loves everyone, and He wants to reach everyone.
Sure.
And we've been in a trap because since the 1960s, we did away with the day of rest. And so Sundays is no longer a time when people are with family and intending on going to church. They're working, they're whatever. Yep. So since we gave up the day of rest, we are all stressed out. We're busy. Our schedules are full. We need more money to pay all the bills for all the stuff we have. And so it's messed up.
Totally,
and we need to kind of do something about that. But in the meantime, God says, love God, who is still going to reach out to His people. And definitely media church is one that can help them get connected to God and stay connected in worship and feel part. But going back to the beginning, when God brought me into media, He told me to host a web church. And that was 20 years ago almost now. So we started up a web church, and we started it with 2,000 people signed up for it.
Wow.
And we have pastors that oversee that web church. So they all had congregations between 10 and 100 people each. And then they could form groups. We didn't have Facebook at the very beginning. That wasn't even
this is before
available
all
at
the
the
social,
time.
Yeah.
So, but they would phone their congregation, they would email them, and they would do special little events on phone conference calls and stuff with them, and minister to their spiritual growth. So we found that a lot of the people that joined the web church were, number one, people in isolated areas. Like, we had a lot of missionaries, actually. We even had two missionaries from an isolated area in China who would actually download all the messages and everything all night just to be able to watch them, because they were in an isolated area. But we had people like that. We had people that were in northern areas of British Columbia, Ontario, places like that had no full gospel churches. They just had maybe little Catholic churches or whatever in their region. So even if they went to church, they wouldn't get their spirit filled. There was no opportunity for them. So we had them. And then we had people who their schedule didn't allow them to go to church because they worked Sundays, and so they wanted to belong to a church, and they wanted to be connected. And then we had others who were still going to a church, especially families that had been generationally in a certain church, but they wanted the more. So we had all kinds of different people meeting all kinds of needs. Oh, and then we had the disgruntled people who were bitter with church. They loved the Lord, but they didn't want to belong to a church anymore because they were too hurt. So we had assignments for each of those. Each person had different needs that the web pastors had to meet. So if they were bitter, there needed to be healing and forgiveness and all that worked on. If they were isolated, they had to know how to develop community where they were, and and help them do that. So that's how it started. But then we just finished our 5th anniversary, right? I think. So it was 6 years ago then. I was at Kim Clement's in his studio, ministering with him.
Wow.
And it's such a prophetic environment. I mean, Kim Clement, his studio there just was like a portal, a revelatory portal, right?
Wow.
So I'm doing this ministry with him, and he's on the keyboard, and all of a sudden I get this download, which is an actual mandate from God. And he said, I want you to start a church, a media church in your studio, and it can have a local presence, but I want you to broadcast it to the nations.
Wow.
And I thought, oh my goodness, because I've planted churches before. Yeah. And if you've ever pastored and planted a church, you know that it's not just like a piece of cake.
Right,
it takes a lot of time. There's a lot of warfare, a lot of people issues that go with it. You know, it's just very, very beautiful, but it can be draining. And I'm already over full time, right?
Right.
I'm just maxed out on my schedule. So I'm thinking, this cannot be you.
Right.
But he just kept at me. So I went and asked intercessors in my team to pray about it. Everyone came back and said, yeah, I think this is the Lord. And I thought, oh my goodness. And then the Lord gave me a word. He said, it'll be like a woman in menopause who finds out she's pregnant.
That's incredible.
Yeah. And he says, you know, at first when you give birth to a child, you're not really wanting to have a new baby when you're in your 50s. But when you do, you'll love that child. It'll be the most special child you've ever had.
Wow.
So that was the word of the Lord. So then we knew that we were to have a local congregation. Like I said, our studio only holds 120 people. So we have a congregation of about 350 that locally are committed, that call it their home. But we have three services on Sunday. So, you know, between, you know, adults and children, we have maybe every Sunday, maybe about 200, maybe 230, 250.
That's great.
Show up,
That's great. Yeah.
Between the two services, including children.
Yeah.
So it's a small congregation locally, but then we have about 10,000 that are identifying with Shiloh online. So through our web church, we encourage our online people to join the web church, because that way they come into community. Even though it's not face-to-face most of the time, it's just online, but at least it's community and they can relate and we can find out what their needs are and pastor them. So we try to encourage that. But a lot of people, they just want to go online, worship, receive the word. But it's so funny. Wherever I go, people will run up to me and they say, I'm a Shiloh-nite, and I just feel so part of it. And I thought, that's got to be God.
Yeah, amen.
Because you're only sitting on the other side of a computer.
That's right.
And so it's got to be God that you feel like your family. And they'll think, oh, you're my spiritual mother, you're my pastor, or whatever. And Francisco gets the same thing, you know, and it's crazy. Robert gets the same thing. I think, Lord, this is a move of your spirit. You are breathing on that, because in the natural, it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and I think that's where I was getting at with kind of my old school way of thinking that's really being challenged. You know, last year I was a part of three different groups. A group with real flesh and blood in a room, in a home. And then I was a part of a pastor's group, you know, with Francisco and a few other pastors. And then I was with another group in Zoom, all these people. And the depth of community and relationship that I had with people online over a screen was just as deep and maybe deeper
in some ways
than it was. And I don't know, there is something about a screen where we pay maybe a little bit more attention to people's face, to what people are saying, than being distracted by all the things that can happen in a room. Yeah. So I'm definitely being challenged, but also certainly want to be a good steward of these opportunities, because they're wonderful opportunities for discipleship.
Absolutely. And a lot of times people on the other side of the screen will feel more free. They're not inhibited. And so they share more. Like I've got approximately 1,000 people on a mentorship group that I have.
It's incredible.
And it is incredible when I think about it.
Yeah.
So I prepare the training for them through videos, through manuals that they follow through with and that.
Yeah.
And then we have discussion groups, and I'm on Facebook daily with them and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's like, we really do feel like a family.
Yeah.
When I meet the A-team, it's like, wow, you know, it's like a connection. But a lot of them, I've never seen them. I've I've read their comments. I've heard them on a conference call or something like that. But I've never met them until they come to me in a conference. But you have this immediate spirit-to-spirit connection. You can feel that you're family. And I think only God can do that, because in the natural mind, it doesn't make sense to me either. But I just know that, like, some of the comments that we've had from that mentorship group have been like people weeping, saying, this has been the deepest mentorship I've ever had in my life. It's been life transforming. I've never had anyone to walk me through these spiritual things until now. Yeah. And I'm thinking, wow. And it's mainly through a video. Yeah. It's not all the time that I'm there on Facebook, but the actual teaching and training is through a video and a manual. And yet, adding the social media component to it personalizes everything for them. And the Q&A sessions, of course, gives them their opportunity to really bring their heart forward, right? But yeah, it's an amazing day that we're living in. I love it.
Yeah, it really is. One of the things I think of when you're talking about that is also that when you're doing a mentoring group, you are thinking about these very specific people that you're going to be speaking into their lives. And so you're forming your content around the needs that they have. Versus sometimes, when we lay out a sermon series or we're laying out a content plan within a local church, sometimes we're not necessarily considering the needs of the people that are coming. We're more considering our passion in that season. Sure. And so there's something so precious about when you are creating specific content in order to meet the needs of your tribe.
Yeah, exactly.
Because that's actually quite rare. I mean, to have leaders that are listening to the needs of the tribe and then serving those needs. I think that's really what Jesus did. People would just ask him questions. Like, some of the best sermons we have from Jesus are because he just would do these big Q&As. Right. He was really serving people where they were at, instead, because he could have just sat there and given us incredible, mind-blowing revelation from heaven. And so I think that there's something so significant about maybe even the content revolution that we're in right now, where if we don't really learn to listen, people aren't just going to sit there and listen to us anymore.
Yeah. And we definitely want to take advantage of the opportunity, because, we don't know what's going to happen 10 years from now. Maybe this won't be available.
That's right. That's right.
Work while it's yet day, for night is coming when no man can work. There are just seasons where something disappears, and you don't want regret looking back and saying, wow, I could have done so much to advance the kingdom then. Yeah. Why didn't I use that opportunity? But it's everything. Every opportunity is before us now. There is no tool that we don't have right now. Yeah. Like, we have so many tools that we never had before. But in this day when media is definitely being used by God, it reminds me of, looking back, almost everything has been opposed. There's so much opposition, which I think is healthy. I think good opposition is healthy. But I remember when the parachurch organizations came forward, because at first there was just local churches. Well, then all of a sudden in the 60s emerged these parachurch organizations. Sure. And the way pastors would talk about them would be like they were parasites, right?
Totally.
And it was such a bad thing. Well, of course, you can see God's hand in raising up these different ministries with their areas of expertise and the equipping components that they offer to the body of Christ, and that were beyond denominational barriers or church barriers, that they could reach beyond that and equip the bigger body and serve the bigger body and all these different mandates. But as it was being introduced by the Spirit, a lot of natural eyes couldn't see it.
That's right. That's right.
And I think it's the same with media.
Interesting.
Because I feel that in the beginning, when we were, kind of cutting into this years ago, oh my goodness, the opposition was phenomenal. Like, it was like you were the devil himself,
really?
Starting, like media church. You're going to keep people away from churches. But it's, as you said in the beginning, it's like churches have actually grown. Church growth, it hasn't diminished. It is growing. We've never had so much church.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, it's everywhere. I mean, the mega church, the micro church, the church in the coffee shops, the church on the streets, the church at media. I mean, it's church everywhere. So I see that it's grown. And I believe that we do need to, in this hour especially, really uphold the word and really make sure that no matter what church it is, media, whatever, that the word is being honored, because there's a lot of voice out there right now, especially in the younger generation, saying, no, we're not so sure that that's the authoritative word of God. No, we're not so sure. We don't really believe this part of it or that part of it. And we do have to be clear. No, we do believe. We are Christians. We believe this is the word. This is our handbook for life. And we have to be clear.
Well, yeah, and that brings me to this question that I have for you regarding like what I'll just call online rabbis. So you have basically online teachers that are leading significant tribes. There's something about the office of the teacher, I think, that has the ability to build a tribe in a way that perhaps no other office can. There's something about giving knowledge, hidden knowledge. I know something that nobody else knows. You haven't been taught this, and when you start giving that out online, there's these huge tribes that are built around the office of the teacher, which is really interesting. But my question is that sometimes you have ideas that are theoretical, in that they haven't really been put to the test within the context of community. Oh. What I'm saying is there are things that I'm teaching here that I know are going to be challenged by real life, because we're in this together.
Exactly.
And so my question to you, Patricia, is regarding what this looks like as far as accountability in an age where everybody can have a microphone, where everyone can have a platform, and yet we can teach stuff that hasn't really been tested within the context of community. And so it's lacking a certain kind of accountability.
Right.
And if you'd be willing to speak into that, and I think maybe it's a larger question. I think maybe it's the idea of like the independent spirit that can sometimes isolate us, like in this thing of what does it mean to be ministers that are connected?
Right. I mean, it's such a good question, and I really believe that in this decade, we need to have some very critical apostolic prophetic roundtables with all fivefold ministries present, with the voice of every part of the body represented. We have some big questions that need to be asked, and we need some solution on many levels. And I think this is one. The whole subject of accountability is huge right now. Right. But the thing with accountability is it's a big farce unless it's from the heart. Yeah. And so, like, you and I both know of situations where, people say that they're accountable, but they're only accountable on paper. And so when you try to hold them to accountability, and it can look like they'll be on a platform saying, I'm accountable, this is my accountability team, and use all the big names and everything. And people are like, wow, this will be a safe person then. Yeah. But then when they're challenged, all of a sudden, no, that person's not my accountability person anymore. This one is. And so it's so, it's so false in that sense. So I think accountability, like, I love accountability, and I think one of the greatest blessings we could do right now is preach on it. Yeah. Preach on the joy of it, the importance of it, because I don't know, I was just, from the very beginning of becoming a Christian, I just loved my pastors. I was in a really good church community, and we had a code of honor. We weren't taught honor like we are today, because there's so much great teaching on honor, but we were taught by the Spirit. I think we just honored our leaders, and when our leaders disciplined us, we accepted the discipline. It was good, and so and part of that was because the discipleship movement had kind of come in with, like, mixed in with the charismatic renewal there, and so it did offer a bit of structure there, even though it kind of went off in a ditch somewhere, but there were some good things in it too. Okay. And so I think I began to, I loved accountability. I saw the value of it. And I think if we can preach the value of it, because right now I have layers of accountability, layers of it. And I love it. And I have a situation on the table right now, actually, and I've been in full-time ministry since 1980, so it's almost 40 years. Wow, that's awesome. And I've served the Lord for 45. Yeah, that's awesome. So, in that, I would call myself a bit seasoned as far as experience and that, and I've seen different things, but my accountability team has asked me not to preach something and not to be associated with a particular ministry that they have concerns about. And I feel a bit differently than they do. And I've humbly submitted my feelings. But I said, but you're my accountability team. So I'm laying this down because I believe that God, if he needs me to be connected with that person in a ministry situation, or if I can be free to even express some of the things that I believe about that, he will make a way and he will endorse it through my accountability team.
Wow. Yeah,
I really
so good.
have faith
really
for
good.
that. So I love it because it has made me a better person. We are mutually accountable on our team in ministry. We have absolute permission to bring each other accountable to the values in our foundation. And so we love that. And we feel safe with each other in that. It is just a code that we've taught and we love. And I think that if the body could be taught how beautiful it is without control, I'm not talking about an ungodly control and accountability, but with a real healthy accountability and interaction and love and relationship in it, it would be so beautiful and more people would want it. Yeah. And so in the local church, when you've got all this stuff out there, I think that we could equally speak about the importance of being accountable and having things like that tested and not being lone rangers out there. The danger of it. I think that, we don't have to be afraid to mention the dangers or to confront things.
That's right.
I don't think we have to be afraid to raise the bar in this hour.
That's right.
And be strong, because I believe that those who really want the truth will hear the truth. And some might go off with the cult leader or whatever. Some might. Sure. But if we speak the truth, then at least they can make a proper choice. If they don't have the truth, like we've been in a situation recently where something was exposed, like a whole bunch of stuff exposed in the background of a leader, but people didn't know it. Most people didn't know what was going on. So they were buying into a lot of the stuff, and a lot of them were getting victimized and stuff like that. Wow. But then it came out into the open. It was exposed officially. And so now people can still go. I mean, that person hasn't stepped down from what they're doing. People can still go and follow them, but at least now they know. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. That's good.
And I believe that if we do speak the truth, those who really love the truth will adhere to it.
Yeah, that's right.
And those who don't won't. But if we don't speak the truth, then all that error is out there and they have nothing to compare it to, or nothing that will give them any warning at all.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so good. And I think it also brings us back to the importance of the church. Like, to the church, it has been given the office of the apostle, the prophet, the pastor, the teacher, and the evangelist, right? For these different safeguards. In a time of such media, you can do online courses. Studying everything from filmmaking to advancing in the prophetic. And if you're really knit into like a good local church, you can subscribe to all these wild, amazing things. Some of this even just wild kind of mystic, exotic theology that's kind of fun, but not necessarily all that. You can dive into a bunch of this stuff. And then I got people in our church. They're going through courses. And they're firing off ideas past me. And Pastor, what do you think about this? And I'm able to speak into their life.
And you're able to pastor them in it, which is beautiful. Yeah. I really believe in the local church. And I always encourage people, like, just get connected to a local church where you can be committed, where you can pass your love tests, where you can pass your faith tests, where you can grow in a community. It's important, very important.
Yeah, and I think that so we were I was a third generation Assemblies of God. We ended up transitioning out back in 2015. Mm-hmm. But one of the question that came up over and over and over again is, well, if we're not going to be a part of the assemblies, then who are we going to be accountable to? You see, there was like an assumption that if you're a part of a denomination or if you're part of a network, the assumption is that there's accountability there. And so that was a great question for us to be asked, because what we realized is that we need specific forms of accountability for specific things. Yeah. Right. So you can't just be accountable in all the areas of your life to one person.
Yeah, exactly.
That you need several people. And so this leads me to a question I have for you in regards to this movement of networks and denominations and that are quite large, where you can't really necessarily know everyone that's in your network. So like how do you be accountable to somebody that you don't really? How do you hold somebody accountable if you don't really know them?
Yeah.
And the question actually is, what do you see in the future for the kingdom in regards to the new networks and these new places of fellowship that are going to be emerging? Are you seeing much as far as what's to come in that area, or do you think that denominational kind of mindset is a thing of the past and an old wineskin?
That's a good question. I don't even know if I've considered it before, but I will say this about networks.
Sure.
Because if a network is just putting your name on an email list or someone's phone list and you show up in an event once a year, it's not really much of a network, okay? There has to be a purpose for that. Mm-hmm. Now, maybe the purpose is simply to become aware of people that are thinking the same as you so that you can move yourself into connecting with others or something, which is valuable. I think that, that's got a place of, being valuable on some levels for sure. I belong to 4 networks, actually, 4 different ones, and they all represent different things. One is a global 7 mountain emphasis, another is prophetic, another is healing, and just I have a close relationship with the leader, so it's like it's beautiful that way. And then another one is our own, which is a women in ministry network.
Yeah.
And how we structured that one, because it's a very clear mandate that the Lord gave on that, but very much in sync with what you're questioning on, I think, because when the Lord spoke about putting the network together, we had to say, okay, what are you looking for in this? And what are these women needing? And why do they need to network?
Wow.
Those are the questions, right? And so we realized that a lot of women didn't have support in their local churches. They needed equipping. That was another thing, is that many of them lacked equipping, even though they had significant places on the different mountains of influence in society. They were in business, they were in government, they were in education systems, all that kind of stuff, but they had no one to connect to that were in the same places, they were doing the same things. So what we did is we broke up it into geographical locations for the most part, to put a leader over each geographical location with only 20 people in each group.
Wow, that's
so
great.
That they could have interaction with one another in the local area, and even get together sometimes for coffee or for, online with a Skype call or Zoom call or something. And then they could have camaraderie, they could minister to one another, they could intercede for each other's mandates and stuff like that. And then having, of course, the Facebook was amazing also. But then we started out of that doing media. We have monthly conference calls with them, letting them express their message so that we can do mandates together as well. So I think each network has to ask the hard questions. Where's this going? Like, what is it for? Is it just to say that you belong to something, but there's no connection, there's no equipping? We put a whole institute together of training for women so that they could get trained in different areas, and so that they could become trainers as well, that in their areas of expertise that we could get equipping for other women for them, and so that women would hear their stories and have the courage to move forward in the covering as well, and do the ordination for the ones that qualify, so that they are covered. So I think that's the big question, is like, where are the networks going? What are they for? How can we perfect them? Because I think it's great, honestly. I think the networks that I belong to, I'm thankful for.
Okay.
And there's relationships that are built through those networks that I value. And some of the projects that we work on together, I value. But I think that we could even make them even more effective. And so as far as accountability, I think most networks are pretty loose. Mm-hmm. I know that ours is on some areas, because outside of our, groups of 20, there's no, we don't require any financial input or anything like that in our network and stuff like that. So it's not like you're, you're going to be church planting together or anything like that, right?
Right.
So,
right.
I mean, I'm just verbally processing right now, but I think that what do denominations offer that is different from networks? Well, I think denominations, of course, are usually built around same doctrine, for sure.
Okay.
The theology and the doctrine is definitely a big foundation of a...
you sign off on it, right?
It's what defines a denomination, right? So that's a big thing, and accountability to that doctrine and to the growth of that mandate. So,
Interesting.
Yeah. So I think in networks you don't have that the same.
Interesting. So it almost seems like that there's a that's interesting you say, because that's absolutely true. Like when I was part of the assemblies, I would have to sign off on all 16 fundamentals. It is kind of funny because when I met with them to let them know that and I got to kind of process through some of the fundamentals that I didn't agree with, and they actually told me, like, hey, you didn't have to sign off on those. They said, there's people at Springfield that have the same theology that you would have concerning that. And I thought, what? I've been signing off on these every year for the last, and they're like, no. Like we just ask that you're not being divisive, right, and that you're not, but that a denomination basically, you have to be a part of that doctrinal system, versus a network can be almost more kingdom, and allow for there to be differences.
Right. And with a denomination, it actually depends on the people who are leading it. And so depending on who's leading it and their style of leadership, and that makes a big difference too.
Sure.
And if you're inside the denomination, then you are definitely working for the denomination. Whereas in a network, everyone's pretty much independent and working with more of a camaraderie together. I mean, they obviously have similar, similar foundations of belief, with, some differences, but similar. But you've got ministries who are independent ministries coming together, which is, cool. I mean, no one's governmentally controlling you. Whereas in a denomination, it's a little different. Yeah,
and I think that the thing that's appealing about a network or a fellowship is the idea that most people want to belong to a movement, not just a tribe. It's great to have friends where you're speaking the same language, but because of Facebook and Instagram, these different things, like, we can feel connected without necessarily signing our lines to the same kind of signing our names to the same kind of agreement and formalizing it. And yet at the end of the day, I know so many people that are in ministry, so many people that are doing incredible things, and yet, like, we're all kind of doing autonomous, kind of independent forms of ministry. And yet I know that almost everybody that I'm running with has a desire to be a part of a kingdom movement on the earth, where there's some form of partnership in order to establish something that can live long beyond us. And I think that that's the thing that's really appealing about a fellowship. But I think that a generation is trying to process what the difference is. Like, they want to be a part of a fellowship where there's actually fellowship,
right? And where you can bring things to the table together and get the different viewpoints. That's really beautiful. Like in some of the networks that I belong to, that's a valuable piece, right? When you get to just connect with people and just bring things to the table, and what do you think about this, and how do you handle that in your ministry? And it is very precious. Yeah.
All right. So I just want to ask you, so here we are, 2020, right? We're still first quarter. What is the Lord really put in your heart for this year? Like, what Patricia King, what is your crosshairs? What are you on target to really kind of go after this year with the Lord, to really partner with him, to really establish in the kingdom?
Well, what the Lord has done for me personally, and everyone's going to have their own piece because he's doing so much right now. I was marked by God in July of last year on an assignment, which was grueling. I'll just be honest with you. It was a grueling assignment. It was the one that I would have asked for, but it was one that he gave me. But in it, I started to get an intercessory prayer burden, and I started to get some very clear encounters with wrestling with principalities and powers. And God started showing me different things that had to be brought into alignment. And things that had to be identified, even some mixtures that get in with the church, especially in the Western church. in particular, and that have infiltrated into society and from society into the church.
Sure.
And so I'm in an intercessory mandate right now, and in a prophetic mandate.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I'm just trying to maneuver through that, asking the Lord, how do you speak the truth in love? How do you bring things that need to be spoken to produce a really beautiful bride, but bring it forth in a way that is going to be healthy? And so that is my mandate, and my wrestling right now is that. And so I've been before the Lord on that, speaking the truth in love, bringing forth. God's tone is changing in some ways.
Yeah.
The way I explain it is like, when my boys were growing up, I would go into the room sometimes, let's say, and they've got stuff all over the floor or whatever. And I say, okay, boys, pick up the clothes, put them in the closet, and then come for breakfast. So 10 minutes later, if they're not at breakfast, it's like I go and check it out. They're still playing stuff on the floor. So at that point, my tone changes.
Absolutely.
And my love doesn't change.
That's right. That's right.
My grace for them doesn't change, but my tone changes because they need to know, no, this is serious. You really do need to hang up the clothes. You really do need to come for breakfast.
That's right.
So I feel that there's, in some aspects, a change of tone that the body's going to have to get used to in God.
Wow.
And that it's going to be very beautiful and very wonderful. But some people might be shocked by it.
Yeah.
And even wonder if it's God.
Yeah.
So I've been studying a lot of past revivals to watch just the voice of God, how the voice of God changed in different eras. So when you look at the first and second great awakenings and you study the sermons, for example, out of those awakenings, it was like very different from what we've been hearing the last 70 years, right?
Totally.
Very, very different. But it was addressing issues that need to be addressed and adjusted in that day that ultimately brought social reform at the end of it. But there was things that had to start in the church to bring the church into alignment at that time in order to bring those really important reforms. So there's just like throughout church history and throughout biblical history even, you'll see God presenting differently at different times when needed. Like even, Elijah with confrontation. And the God of the Old Testament is the same God in the New Testament. We don't have two gods. It's all the same God. So his heart hasn't changed.
That's right.
He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So it's like, God, everything's finished now in Jesus Christ. But the behaviors of your people aren't necessarily manifesting the life that's been given to them. So how do we reconcile that? How do we bring people back to see who they are and act accordingly and change society as a result of that, to bring reform? So these are the big things I'm looking at right now. The things I'm before the Lord with, to see the bride prepared in a beautiful way, a glistening bride in the midst of the harvest. I very much am just really passionate about the harvest that's going on right now. But I feel more to walk in partnership with those that I trust. And being involved in that. But my heart is for the body, especially it's harvest time. Jesus talked about the harvest time where the wheat and the tares that grew up in the same field together would come to a place where the tares would be removed. And I think it's a time when God says, okay, let's examine our own lives even, say, God, would you remove the tares? Anything that was a wrong seed in there, it could be a seed of doctrine or a seed of the flesh or something, anything that grew up in this garden of life, could you remove it? Because I only want what's glory, right? And I feel like we're in that season. I believe it's a word of alignment. God is saying align to the truth. And so anything that's not according to the plumb line of truth, he wants to address in this hour to bring us back to who we are. And I think it's because, and I mean, when you see things prophetically, it always feels like it's in the now, right? But I see it so big, this big, great move, massive move of presence and kingdom just manifesting in the earth, right? And I don't know what it's going to look like or feel like. I'm just almost afraid to imagine it, because it'll be probably so much different, but it's so much better than what I could ever imagine. So I want to be positioned for it. and to receive it and to be everything that God's looking for. So that's my voice for the church in this hour.
Awesome.
Is to see that established and people strong and whole and living for God and not bringing in behaviors that are contrary to his love and his purity. Just come on, let's let the life of God flow like a river and manifest the beautiful, precious love that he's given us. So
yeah, so good. That's so good, Patricia. One of the things that we've been looking at here in Seattle Bible Center is that moves of God end not because God quits moving.
Right.
Moves of God end because of man. Man's issues, man's character, and so because of this, it's so important that we have there's no shortage of wine, but there is a shortage of wineskins.
Right.
People that have the disciplines, the friendships, the relationships, the open lines of communication. And I think that it's so beautiful to hear really what you're going after in the season, because the Lord's really using you to prepare a new wineskin so that we can see that a move of God that's been prophesied where there's no end to it. It's not a 3-year thing. It's not even a 30-year thing like the Great Awakening, but that there's such a character, there's such relationship, there's such trust and commitment that we can run together and if one man doesn't make it, it's not going to botch the entire move.
Right.
Because it's bigger than a man, and it's this place of fellowship. And so I just love your desire to not, like, what I've known about you over the years is that you're not an end justifies the means kind of a person. You're the kind of person that's not so concerned about the outcome. You really want to make sure that things and people are healthy. And I so appreciate that about you, Patricia.
Thank you.
And so appreciate just this last season that you've been in, and just to go after this place of that you've been going after justice and truth, and to be a voice for the voiceless. That's who you've always been. You've always been an advocate for victims. You've always and so just believing that there's going to be such a harvest for you,
right,
because of what you've sown in this last season.
Yeah, it's time for us to raise the bar so that the kingdom can come.
That's right.
I mean, it's an eternal kingdom, right? So, I mean, just think of that, like you mentioned earlier, not stopping.
Yeah.
Why should we?
That's right.
Right.
That's right. That's right.
Why should God's presence or a tangible move of the Spirit ever end?
That's right.
Because the kingdom is eternal.
That's right.
And so, but we need to position, because God's not mocked. Whatever a man sows, he'll reap. So if we do so, I'm talking about not just an individual, but the church. If we sow to the flesh, we will reap.
That's right.
And so we will reap corruption, it says, actually. So that's that's a burden on my heart right now. And I want to see sowing to the Spirit and reaping life, right? It's going to be so good.